to hear that.
Dáil Éireann den all néfal a chur fuing, chun sin de stúrin ar níomhartha agus neart de grasta de bhronóirin chun iad de thuirt chun críocha. Anas gur úteat snófar ar nila bhríthir agus ar nila gníomh fasta, agus gur tríd a chríoch nófar iad, trí Christ our Déirne. Amen. Direct we beseech thee, O Lord, our actions by thy holy inspirations, and carry them on by thy gracious assistance, that every word and work of ours may always begin from thee, and by thee be happily ended, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Is mór an ordam a bheith in ann ar son gach cóilta de Seanad Éireann, 100 míle fáilte go dtí an seomra seo a chur roimh 100 ara na Halban Nicola Sturgeon CPA. Ó cád starúil atá ann a dhéanamh níos láide agus níos dóine an ceangal atá ann idir ar díre. It's a great honour for me today on behalf of the members of Seanad Éireann to offer the traditional 100,000 welcomes to this House to the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, MSP. This is a historic occasion which will strengthen and deepen the links between our two countries. The roots of the relationship which Ireland and Scotland have grown together already run deep. The 20 miles of water which separate, or perhaps connect us, have facilitated strong interaction between us in many spheres: political, religious, economic, cultural and linguistic, and throughout our recorded history. From the early Gaelic kingdom of Dáil Éireann through the influence of Columkill at Iona in the 6th century and Edward Bruce in Ireland in the latter Middle Ages, and through the contribution of the Scottish Enlightenment to political thought in 18th century Ireland and migration in both directions over the centuries, our countries have together established strong bonds which will always endure. Relations between Ireland and Scotland at the political level remain as close as ever, with a regular exchange of high-level bilateral visits in recent years. The visits to Scotland by our President and Taoiseach and by Irish Government ministers, and the visits here by the First Minister and other Scottish ministers serve to remind us of the extent of political and official cooperation in many areas of mutual interest. These interests are many and varied and include energy, education, urban housing and planning reform and international development. Cooperation also takes place on a multilateral basis within the framework of the British-Irish Council and at a parliamentary level at the British-Irish Parliamentary Association. The First Minister's visit to Ireland comes at a challenging time in the history of both countries. The result of the referendum in the United Kingdom on membership of the European Union has placed before all of us in Britain and Ireland the need to examine in a fundamental way how we relate to each other and to the European Union in the years ahead. We in Ireland know, of course, that a majority of the people of Scotland voted to remain in the EU, and we understand the position of the Government of Scotland with regard to exploring options for a continued Scottish relationship with the EU following the withdrawal of the United Kingdom. We know also that your government and the other devolved administrations are engaging constructively within the framework of the Joint Ministerial Committee, and we hope that a negotiation position which reflects the interests of all constituent parts of the UK can emerge from this process. First Minister, we wish you well in your efforts to secure the optimum outcome for the people of Scotland. Ireland, as an EU member state, will be open to engaging constructively with the British Government once the negotiation process begins, so that a withdrawal agreement which acknowledges the diverse range of interests within the UK can be achieved in a manner consistent with our own national interests and the interests of the EU as a whole. Much of our focus is naturally on Northern Ireland, which gives rise to a unique set of challenges arising from the border and the entitlement of the people born there to Irish and EU citizenship. Before I conclude, I would like to extend a warm welcome to the Ambassador of the United Kingdom, His Excellency Mr Robin Barnett, CMG, who is present in the Distinguished Visitors Gallery. First Minister, I know that I speak on behalf of all senators when I pay tribute to you for the way in which you embody so well the spirit of the modern, confident and outward-looking nation that you have the privilege to lead. I wish you and your government and all of the people of Scotland every success in your endeavours as you look towards a challenging but exciting future. Be assured that you may always rely on the Irish people and on the members of Seanad Éireann to remain firm and supportive neighbours. First Minister, it is now my pleasure to invite you to address Seanad Éireann.
Cathaoirleach, thank you so much for your very warm welcome here today. It is a great honour to have been invited to address all of you today. I understand that I am the first serving head of government to address the Seanad, so it is truly a historic day for all of us, and I thank you warmly for the opportunity. It is wonderful to join you in these absolutely beautiful surroundings. Last night in Dublin, I had the pleasure of visiting Trinity College and seeing there, for the first time in my life, the Book of Kells. That is a truly moving reminder of just how deeply and inextricably linked the peoples and the cultures of Ireland and Scotland have always been. Indeed, when Columcille travelled from Ireland to Iona back in 563, he helped shape Scotland forever. And then, more than 200 years later, when monks made the corresponding journey from Iona back to Ireland, they bequeathed to this country, in the Book of Kells, one of the great masterpieces of European civilization. These exchanges in both directions across the Irish Sea have continued ever since, and they have helped to create a special and unbreakable bond between our two countries. As a student, a lawyer and most recently a member of the Scottish Parliament in the city of Glasgow, I have seen evidence of that bond each and every day of my adult life, and I know it has enhanced Glasgow and Scotland in many, many different ways. Indeed, one of Scotland's great Gaelic poets, Sorley MacLean, described it as the humanity that the ocean could not break, that 1,000 years has not severed. Of course, the strength of our bond isn't just defined by the people who have moved between our two countries. Much of the modern history of both Scotland and Ireland has been shaped by our experiences of emigration beyond these islands. As a result of that, for all the deep regret that we undoubtedly feel about the historic causes of emigration from our shores, both of our countries can today take great pride in what Scottish and Irish people have achieved overseas. We are unusually blessed as countries with ambassadors and supporters, advocates in every corner of the globe. Indeed, when Ireland's rugby team beat New Zealand 3 weeks ago, a result I thought it politic to mention, not least because it gives hope to all of us, you had the good fortune of being able to play at home in the great city of Chicago. And there are 2 points in particular I want to make today about our shared history and experiences. As we know, Europe is now facing its greatest refugee crisis since the end of the Second World War. And Scotland and Ireland both know that in other times and in very different circumstances, the peoples of our nations were also driven by the instinct for self-preservation and the desire for a better life, to seek a future far away from the lands of their birth. And perhaps that helps to explain why both Scotland and Ireland have responded with such an open heart to the current crisis. Today, Scotland is home to almost 1/3 of the Syrian refugees who have been resettled in the United Kingdom, and I know that Ireland too is playing her full part. And of course, both of us are making the case for a coordinated European response. And given our own national experiences, for Scotland and Ireland to turn away from this crisis wouldn't simply be a failure of compassion. It would be a denial, perhaps, of our own identity. By helping people who so desperately need our help today, we are in some senses repaying the obligations of our past. The second point I want to make is perhaps a more straightforward one. Although we share as countries more than 1,000 years of history, I hope and believe that relations between Scotland and Ireland now are stronger, warmer and more harmonious than they have ever been in the past. I know I have been immensely touched by the hospitality I have been shown since I arrived here in Dublin yesterday. And I hope that your President, who I had the honour of spending some time with yesterday, felt the same warmth of welcome when he did us the honour of visiting Scotland in June. In terms of political cooperation, Ireland has recently increased its diplomatic representation in Scotland, and Scotland has this year established a new government office here in Dublin. Ireland, of course, is one of Scotland's biggest export markets, and I discussed this morning with your business community how we can further strengthen and deepen those links. And as well as healthy business relationships, we also share and enjoy strong cultural ties. Indeed, the Abbey Theatre is now directed by 2 people who were previously based in Glasgow, while a Dubliner runs the Edinburgh International Festival. And of course, these political, economic and cultural links draw great strength from and also reinforce the most important connection of all, the friendship, indeed the kinship, shared by millions of Scottish and Irish people across these islands and right around the world. And I believe passionately that all of these ties will be strengthened even further to our mutual benefit in the years ahead. Of course, throughout the last 4 decades, an important context for our cooperation has been our shared place in the European Union. Last year, I gave a lecture at Solmarostag, the Gaelic Language College on the island of Skye. Your former President, Mary Robinson, had delivered the same lecture there 18 years previously. And as I was preparing my own speech, I was very struck to read the remarks that Mary Robinson made back then. She attributed in that lecture the revival of traditional Irish culture in part to your membership of the European Union. She said that the experience of interaction with other European states on a basis of equality has helped our national self-confidence and heightened our awareness of the value of our distinctive contribution to European culture and civilisation. Now, Scotland's experiences in Europe have not, of course, been identical to Ireland's. We are not an independent member state yet, but much of what President Robinson said holds very true for Scotland as well. The sense that small countries can be equals in a partnership of many is something that appeals to us about the European Union. And so the basic principle of EU membership, that independent countries cooperate for the common good has generally seemed to us to be praiseworthy rather than problematic. Indeed, that perspective might help to explain why Scotland did vote so convincingly to remain within the European Union. It's not just that we value the practical benefits that EU membership brings, although we do. It's also that for many people in Scotland, as in Ireland, being European has become a positive part of who we are and how we contribute to the world around us. So there is no doubt whatsoever that the UK-wide vote to leave the EU was deeply unwelcome. For Scotland, as for Ireland, it creates a challenge which is not of our making or of our choosing. Last week I had the pleasure of meeting the Taoiseach at the British-Irish Council in Cardiff, and yesterday also met your Foreign Minister, Charlie Flanagan. And it was clear from both of these discussions that Brexit is the greatest foreign policy challenge Ireland has faced since it joined the European Union. And for Scotland too, we know that how we, and indeed how the UK as a whole, responds to June's vote will define us for generations to come. So I thought it might be helpful to set out some of the principles that are guiding the Scottish Government as we confront the consequences of the EU referendum and seek to navigate the best way forward. The first is straightforward. Scotland believes that the UK as a whole should now seek continued membership of the European single market and the European Customs Union. After all, 48% of voters in the UK chose to remain in the EU. So too did 2 of the 4 nations of the UK. And many people who campaigned to leave the European Union were clear in their view that doing so need not involve leaving the single market. So I accept there is a mandate for the UK Government to take England and Wales out of the European Union. But I don't accept that there is a mandate to take any part of the UK out of the single market, especially when we consider the economic consequences of such a step. But secondly, to guard against the very real possibility that the UK does decide to leave not just the EU but also the single market, we are exploring options that would respect the vote in Scotland and allow us to retain the benefits of the single market, not, of course, instead of free trade across the United Kingdom, but in addition to it. The Scottish Government will publish some proposals before the end of this year, setting out our thinking in further detail. And these proposals will focus on options for Scotland within the United Kingdom. Of course, there is also the option of Scotland considering again the question of becoming an independent country. And that option, of course, remains firmly on the table. If the path that the UK chooses to take turns out to be deeply damaging to Scotland's best interests, to our economic, social, cultural and international interests, then the people of Scotland must have the right to choose a different future. Of course, we understand, acutely understand, that none of what lies ahead will be easy. But then nothing about Brexit is going to be easy. We are living today in unprecedented times, and those unprecedented times require imagination, open minds and fresh thinking. The third point I want to make about our approach relates specifically to Ireland. The Scottish Government knows and understands how important, how vitally important it is to maintain an open border on the island of Ireland. So regardless of what agreements may be reached elsewhere on these islands, we will support unequivocally an open border here. We fully understand that for reasons of geography, history and the simple preservation of peace, Ireland's circumstances demand close and particular attention. The final theme I want to address today is a more general one. It is about cohesion, social justice and solidarity. When President Higgins spoke to the Scottish Parliament back in June this year, he talked about the consequences of unsustainable economic models which have fomented instability and widening inequalities. In my view, Brexit is one of those consequences. Now, there are many different causes of the UK's vote to leave the European Union, and we will no doubt be analysing and debating these causes for many years to come. But for a lot of people, they will have included entirely legitimate concerns about the EU. It is, after all, an imperfect organisation. But there also seems little doubt to me that the Brexit vote was also a product of inequality, of disillusionment with the established order, of a sense of alienation and disenfranchisement. After all, if people don't believe and feel that they are benefiting from the status quo, we can't be surprised if they choose not to vote for the status quo. And although every single region in Scotland voted to remain in the EU, as First Minister of Scotland, I cannot ignore or forget the fact that even in Scotland, 1 million of our fellow citizens voted to leave. So one consequence of the referendum for us is an even sharper focus on social justice. And I think that crystallises the challenge, indeed the choice, that the Brexit result poses for all of us who support free trade and who value the economic, social and cultural benefits of immigration. We can choose to turn inwards, or we can choose to stand strong for the principles of an open economy and a progressive liberal democracy. I choose the latter. But in doing so, I recognise that we mustn't just assert the benefits of these values. We must be able to demonstrate the benefits of these values. Ireland, I think, provides an interesting example. The decisions you took after 1958 to open your economy to the world were transformational. You are a wealthier, more open and more diverse society as a result. But recent years have demonstrated that all open trading nations, including Ireland and certainly including Scotland, need to ensure that growth is truly sustainable, that all parts of our society have a fair chance to contribute to it, and that everyone can fairly share the benefits of it. There should be no contradiction whatsoever between being an open, dynamic and competitive economy and a fair, inclusive and welcoming society. In fact, what we are seeing around the world today demonstrates that the two must go together. A fair society is essential if we are to sustain support for an open economy. That's why in Scotland our economic strategy prioritises fairness together with economic competitiveness. It's also why Scotland, like Ireland, was an early supporter of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We believe that the goals provide a framework for all countries to follow. They encourage us to exemplify fair and sustainable development at home while also promoting it overseas. As we do this, I think there are many areas where Scotland and Ireland can work with and indeed learn from each other. I had talks yesterday that touched on how our governments and our businesses are cooperating to promote renewable energy and tackle climate change. In Scotland, our ban on smoking in public places in terms of social policy was heavily influenced by Ireland's example, and that policy is already improving the health of our people. I know that Ireland is currently considering Scotland's legislation on minimum unit pricing of alcohol, and I wish you well as you do so. Both of our nations have also travelled a long way in recent years on issues such as equal marriage. It was legalised in Scotland at the end of 2014, while Ireland, to your great credit, became the first state to enshrine that right in its constitution. And finally, I know that President Higgins has recently called for small countries to work together on conflict resolution and sustainable development. I welcome warmly that call, and I believe that Scotland and Ireland, as individual nations but also as partners, are well placed to play our part. In terms of overseas development cooperation, Scotland is committed to learning from the example of other small countries, including Ireland. Indeed, in 2012, it was partly the influence of Mary Robinson that led Scotland to become the first country in the world to establish a climate justice fund, a fund that recognises and seeks to address the fact that the people affected most by climate change across our planet are those who have done the least to cause climate change. It is further evidence of Scotland's determination to show leadership on climate change, the biggest environmental, economic and moral issue currently facing our planet. And it demonstrates our desire to lead by example at home and exert a positive influence overseas. In all of this and in so much more, Scotland and Ireland are living examples of the positive impact that small, open, outward-looking countries can have on the world around us. And the need to safeguard and enhance our reputations as open, outward-looking countries is perhaps greater now than it has been for many decades. I hope very much that we can and we will support each other as we seek to do so. I began the speech today by referring to the Book of Kells. The first line of the very first page of that book is widely believed to have been from St. Jerome, setting out his intention to make a new work from the old. There's an echo of that sentiment in the quotation I want to close with today. In 2004, Ireland's presidency of the European Union coincided with the accession of 10 new member states. The occasion, as I'm sure many of you will vividly remember, was marked on May Day in Phoenix Park. The ceremony then included a poem by the great Seamus Heaney. The closing verses of that poem speak to the optimism, the humanity, the basic kindness that all good societies need to flourish and succeed. They also encapsulate the tolerance, internationalism and open-mindedness that I believe must always define who we are, no matter the headwinds and the challenges we might currently face. So on a day when newcomers appear, let it be a homecoming, and let us speak the unstrange word as it behoves us here. Move lips, move minds, and make new meanings flare like ancient beacons signalling, peak to peak, from Middle Sea to North Sea, shining clear. My hope is that Scotland and Ireland, sharing as we do an open heart for newcomers and a faith in dialogue's power to move minds, will work even more closely together in the years ahead. And I hope we will make new works, new meanings, new impacts from our ancient ties and our shared values. If we do so, we can and we will ensure that our small nations send a big and a very powerful signal to others across our world. And we can help to deliver real and tangible benefits throughout these islands, across our continent and right around the world. Thank you so much for the honour of addressing you.
Thank you very much, First Minister. Just to outline, it's a very historic and important day, so the leaders of each group have 5 minutes, and subsequent to that we'll allow questions from as many as possible with the parameter that Nicola Sturgeon, our guest of honour here today, will respond not later than 1 p.m. So if people stick to their time slots, more people will get in. So Fine Gael is the first. Is it Senator James Riley?
Thank you very much. I'll be sharing my time with Michelle Mulhern and frankly
Well, it's been agreed there's no sharing. That was certain to all the leaders that.
Sorry.
Yeah. That was declined, which was going to cause problems. So well, you have, yeah. Well, I'll allow her in later to ask a question.
Come on, seanadóirí. I wasn't aware of that, and I apologise. But at least it means, First Minister, that my delivery won't be as rushed as it might otherwise have been. I'd like to welcome you here on this historic occasion. It's not your first visit to this country as First Minister, but it's certainly a very historic one, and one we all welcome. As you pointed out in your own speech, we share many, many common values and a long, long history. And many of us, just relating to your comments on the rugby, would follow Celtic and the soccer in a very committed way. We have a long history of immigration back and across from both Scotland into Ireland and Ireland into Scotland. And indeed, as you pointed out yourself, we've been strengthening ties through our consulate and following very closely the Scottish position vis-à-vis the exit from the EU by the UK. We share very much a common cause in ensuring that the UK stays as close to the EU as it possibly can, and in particular in relation to the single market. And I note your comments in relation to various outcomes that could possibly arise and how you reserve your position in relation to that. It's very important to us, and we're very much heartened by the fact that Scotland voted to stay in the EU. And we do hope and we'll be very supportive of ensuring that your voices are heard during the UK negotiations, and indeed those of our fellow Celts north of the border, who also voted to stay within the EU. We know, however, that remaining in the single market, the UK will be faced with a serious challenge if it refuses to allow the free movement of people. And I note in your delivery here today that you have alluded to that and our own shared history of immigration across the world and the generosity shown to our people when we were in need hundreds of years ago, and indeed in more recent years as well, as people sought a better life outside of our respective countries. So I think it does behove us, as you have pointed out, to be supportive of that movement of people and to do our fair share in relation to the current immigration crisis in Europe and in North Africa. I wanted particularly to thank you for your comments around your support for the border, and that as little as possible should change in that respect. Only harm can come from a hard border, both harm for us here in the Republic of Ireland and harm in the north of Ireland. The ongoing uncertainty and volatility of sterling has resulted in a major impact already in this country economically, and indeed has impacted obviously on the people of Britain as well. However, I believe that Scotland has a particular role to play in this area, as you have said yourself, and I'd also like to finish on a positive note. We are all Celts. We have been very successful in the past and good at turning adversity to advantage, and we have also been very good at turning challenges into opportunity. And I believe, particularly following your comments here today, that we can and will do so again, notwithstanding the serious challenges up ahead. So I want to thank you again very much for your historic visit. I want to thank you very much on behalf of Fine Gael as Deputy Leader for taking the time to come here and for your very supportive comments in relation to your issue for the UK to stay as close as possible to the EU, but in particular for the border situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Arda.
I had intended to share my time with Senator Clifford Lee, so my speech won't go longer than 3 minutes. First Minister, today I'm very pleased to welcome you to the Seanad on behalf of the Fianna Fáil Group. Your election as leader of the Scottish National Party and assuming the office of First Minister in November 2014 marked the first occasion a woman was elected to either of those posts. It was obviously a tremendously proud time for you, your family and your many supporters, but particularly for Manán na hAlban, the women of Scotland. I had the great pleasure in meeting you yesterday during a discussion in Leinster House with other female elected representatives organised by the Women for Election Group. I have to say your talk yesterday and today was inspiring, and you were a role model for many women who are elected and for those women unelected but contemplating running for office. Your commitment to equality and social justice is admirable, and your courage to stick to your beliefs when it comes to gender equality in your own cabinet in particular is unquestionable. You, First Lady, leave us in the dust when it comes to equality at cabinet. The day after your election as First Minister, you unveiled your first cabinet with a 50-50 gender balance. Without a doubt, a very brave decision. By comparison, at present, under 27% of our cabinet are female. Ireland has always had a great affinity with Scotland, most likely because of our shared and common history, and the independence our country sought and fought for. I admired your determination for independence in the 2014 referendum, and I admire your continuing passion for independence. While it wasn't to be your day in 2014, Scotland's day will come, and I know you will succeed in the future. At a time of great uncertainty within Europe, I also know we share so many common values and aspirations with the Scottish people. This uncertainty has stemmed from Brexit. This uncertainty that has stemmed from Brexit is deeply worrying to both Scotland and Ireland, and I believe the turbulence we are experiencing should lead to both countries forging even stronger links and moving together, working to achieve our common goals. The strength you showed in the immediate aftermath of the Brexit referendum demonstrated to all you are a formidable and able politician not to be reckoned with. The people of Scotland clearly have confidence in you and know you will take the necessary measures to do what is in their best interests. I hope, following on from your visit to Dublin, you will return to Scotland more confident and assured of your relationship with Ireland and knowing you have a strong ally across the water and that our cooperation, support and friendship will grow stronger in the future. Finally, it is a tremendous personal pleasure to be addressing you today, and I wish you the very best of luck in the weeks and months ahead. Gur míle maith agat.
Thank you. Senator McDowell.
Look, Curran Fáilte wrote Príomh Minister na Halba. It's a wonderful thing that those words are spoken in the first languages of both of our countries. And as an independent member of this House, it gives me real pleasure on behalf of the independent members, and I think on behalf of everyone here, to thank you for the thoughtful, challenging and understanding words that you have spoken to us today. I was thinking, Chairman, when you were speaking about the channel between Northern Ireland and Scotland being 20 miles or so apart, or 18 miles apart, that it was in fact at one stage the highway between the peoples on both sides, rather than a dividing geographical feature. Indeed, I was just thinking that my own father and mother's names come from Argyll and Barra, which shows just how connected that part of the world was in those days. Can I say on my own behalf, and I think on behalf of most members here, if not on behalf of everyone, that I wholly and unambiguously support Scotland's movement for national independence represented by your party. And I salute you as First Minister and your predecessor Alex Salmond and your party for their great achievement in bringing that issue centre stage and front stage in the affairs of these islands. Nationalism and the idea of an independent nation-state are sometimes regarded as ideologically suspect or wrong by some people. And I believe that the nation-state, dealing with the point that you were mentioning about fairness in the face of global finance and the inexorable workings of capitalism sometimes, the nation-state is often the bulwark to which ordinary women and men can turn to defend their interests and to articulate their need for protection from what would otherwise be overwhelming forces. I also believe that the European Union and the words that you spoke about the partnership of independent states in the European Union, those words echo, by the way, the feelings of most Irish people towards the European Union. It is not as a superstate, it's as a partnership of individual states. And I hope that the day comes that Scotland will play its part as a full member state of the European Union, however challenging that prospect may seem at this stage. Scotland and Ireland have, of course, as you have said, so much at stake in the outworking of the present Brexit process. And I don't think we needed the eagle-eyed telephoto lens of a journalist yesterday outside Downing Street to underline the fact that so much at the moment is unknown. In fact, if you look at the Brexit process, the decision by a majority of the people of the United Kingdom to leave the European Union is not merely at this stage a leap into the unknown, but it's also a leap into the unknowable because the parameters of the negotiations are so unclear. And I would say this in relation to what goes forward from now in relation to the negotiations that we face into. It seems to me that the words that you have spoken about the priority of maintaining the single market and the common customs area, those are priorities, and although they may not be obvious to many people who feel that Brexit means Brexit, whatever that means, it seems to me that we do believe, both in Scotland and in Ireland and in all parts of Ireland, that it is an imperative that whatever happens between the United Kingdom and the European Union, that the relationship should be as close as possible going forward, because it is not in the interest of the peoples of Europe or any part of Europe or the people of any part of these islands that there should be a distant relationship. So can I finish by saying this, through the Chair, can I finish by saying this? The achievements of the Scottish National Party are huge. The fact that you are regarded by some people, and were regarded as a threat in the last general election to be avoided, and a galvanising argument for some people by way of reaction, speaks hugely to the power and the strength of your arguments and the strength of your movement. And I would just say this, that in the years that lie ahead of us now, and there are so many uncertainties, that I hope that this occasion, which is an historic occasion, I hope that this occasion marks the beginning of a real demonstrated cordiality between the Irish people and the Scottish people, because they do share so many values, they do take pride in their independence, and they do take pride in their nationhood. And I would finish by saying this, that many people have in the past queried the value of independence. For this country, independence has been a remarkably transforming thing, and I have no doubt that the genius of the Scottish people, once released through full independence, will achieve the same for Scotland. And from that point of view, it is a huge honour for me to be allowed and to express these views through the Chair to you, First Minister, and to warmly welcome you and wish you not merely a welcome, but to express the wish that in the future you will return here and that we will engage with you more and more in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Conway Welsh.
Fáilte chur cogan Nicola Sturgeon cogan Seanad Éireann. It is indeed a great honour to welcome you, First Minister, to Ireland and to this House on behalf of the Sinn Fein party. We welcome you as the leader of a nation and people with whom we in Ireland enjoy a long and enduring affinity as close neighbours and good friends. We share a strong Gaelic heritage, language and Celtic culture, of which we are both rightly proud of. The historic bonds between our two nations has been well catalogued, and indeed was spoken about earlier on by you, Cathaoirleach, and you, First Minister. But of course, Scotland gave us two iconic revolutionaries of the 1916 Easter Rising in James Connolly and Margaret Skinnader, who in no small way, along with others, shaped Ireland over the past century in our struggle for national independence. And I should mention also in 1937 the Kirkendullah tragedy, which has links with my own community in Mayo, with Achill Island, and the 10 people who lost their lives there. And to acknowledge in the context of that the great contribution that Scotland made when people from the west of Ireland and the community I came from travelled to Scotland to participate in the potato harvesting. And indeed, many families left at home in Ireland and in the west of Ireland were dependent on that money to come from Scotland to Ireland. And we make every effort possible to keep up those ties on a community level. And you will be very welcome to Mayo and to Achill Island to see for yourself. But today, your visit, First Minister, is about the future and about how our nations will strengthen the bond that ties us politically, culturally and economically. The island of Ireland and Scotland has held membership status of the EEC and the EU since 1973, and throughout this period of 43 years we have become progressively integrated into the European Union and the single market. Sinn Féin has a long-standing policy of critical engagement with the EU, where we support measures that are in Ireland's interests and oppose and campaign for progressive reform on those which are bad for Ireland. However, there is absolutely no denying that the unilateral decision being taken at this time by the British government to withdraw membership from the EU and drag Scotland and the north of Ireland with it without our consent is disastrous and profoundly undemocratic. I welcome your statement that you will support unequivocally the open border. The British government is on a collision course with the EU, in which our stability and economic process are regarded as collateral damage. On the 23rd of June, 62% of voters in Scotland and 56% of voters in the north of Ireland democratically expressed their wish to remain within the EU. For our part in Sinn Fein, we are strongly opposed to the North being forced out of the EU and believe that as part of the Brexit negotiations, it is essential that we argue the case for designated special status for the North within the European Union. We believe it is in our interest to find common cause with regions such as Scotland, who share our objective to remain and work together to argue our case in forthcoming negotiations on Brexit. The British government is indicating that they intend to repeal the European Communities Act, leaving all EU legislation on the statute books so that Westminster can pick it apart and decide what is to be retained, amended or repealed. This will have very serious consequences for the devolved regions, since the legislative competence is underpinned by the respective Scotland Act and the NI Act 1998, which means that no law can be incompatible with any of the conventions on rights or to be incompatible with EU community law. Today, Ireland, like Scotland, is a confident region in transition. The Good Friday Agreement, which received overwhelming endorsement in referenda held north and south, represents the institutional, constitutional and legal framework which defines the new relationships that now exist within and between Ireland and Britain. The agreement also enshrines the right of the Irish people alone to exercise their right to self-determination and to united Ireland through consent by referendum north and south. Sinn Féin believes that Brexit and the assistance of the British government to drag the north of Ireland out of the EU with it severely undermines the institutional, constitutional and legal integrity and status of the Good Friday Agreement, an international treaty of which the Irish government is a co-guarantor and which the people of Ireland reasonably expect them to safeguard and defend all of its parts. The risks otherwise are to unravel the peace and progress for the past 20 years. And finally, Cathaoirleach, we are in uncharted territory since no member state has left the EU before. However, given that there is already a recognition at EU level of the special circumstances that pertain on the island of Ireland, it is entirely rational position to argue for the North to be designated special status within the EU. The political stability, economic prosperity, trade relationships and jobs of the entire island of Ireland must be protected and enhanced together. But Ireland must support too Scotland's democratic right to retain its natural position within the EU through a differentiated relationship with the EU. I commend your leadership, First Minister Sturgeon, in standing up for Scotland's national interest in this regard. Gora Míle Mágad.
Gora Mágad. Senator Higgins.
First Minister, on behalf of the Civil Engagement Group, I thank you for your visit to the House and for your inspiring speech. There is a long and interwoven history between Scotland and Ireland in the migrations of our people, in the constant crossing of our seas and the overlapping of our myths, stories and music and indeed language. And the vibrant exchange of ideas has always been a part of this. From the journeys of Colmkill through to the great debates of the Enlightenment, where Scottish and Irish thinkers sent new ideas across Europe. And of course, as was mentioned at another revolutionary time 100 years ago, Scottish migrants James Connolly and Margaret Skinnader brought their ideas and commitment to Ireland's cause, from their founding roles within the trade union movement to the part they both played in our rising, which we commemorate this year. Certainly, Ireland must thank Scotland for the inspiration which each new generation draws from Connolly's ideas, his internationalism and his ambition for humanity. To quote from one of your own great contemporary Scottish writers, Alistair Gray, "A good life means fighting to be human under growing difficulties." Something similar might be said of the good society. For there is such a thing as society, and Scotland has always shown and continues to show the willingness to fight for progressive and social policies, even in the face of the greatest challenges. You demonstrated this, First Minister, in the clarity and leadership of your statement on the morning after the Brexit referendum, particularly when you spoke to migrants living in Scotland and assured them of their welcome and the value placed on their contribution. A message which is ever more important of inclusion at a time of increasingly divisive language of hate and racism across the world. Scotland is also inspired through deep and innovative public service commitment. Your investment in social housing and in access to education at all levels, and your determination to tackle alcohol-related harm are deeply resonant in this chamber. While measures such as those put forward by the Scottish Dementia Working Group have, I know, been of keen interest to my colleague Senator Kelleher and many others across the Oireachtas who plan to visit you and learn from you in those policies. I would like to note also the practical solidarity which Scotland has offered to women in Northern Ireland in supporting their access to reproductive health services. First Minister, there is underpinning all of this Scotland's fundamental and important recognition that equality is the foundation on which social and economic progress must be grounded. And, as might be expected from a nation of great engineers, the Scottish have sought to put in place real structures and mechanisms to deliver that equality, from the statutory public duty to the gender inequality budgeting to your annual equality statement. This is an area which we in Ireland are now starting to explore, an area I hope we will embrace still further. And First Minister, I would greatly appreciate if you might comment on the importance of Scotland's annual equality statement and the message it sends. I ask this because, as you have yourself observed before, disaffection with the political system is felt in too many communities. And there is, right across Europe, a need to rebuild connections between the public and parliaments, between democracy and decision-making. I commend the young and vibrant Scottish Parliament and Assembly in Holyrood who have stepped up with very active campaigns of engagement and of enfranchisement. And I know that you are determined to keep faith with that enfranchisement by ensuring that the votes which so many Scottish citizens cast against Brexit are recognised and respected in any new process or roadmap which emerges. First Minister, there is a friendship and a solidarity which runs deep between our countries. From the very letter of Bruce, when he urged our people, free in ancient times, to come together more eagerly and joyfully in friendship. But there is alongside that friendship and solidarity, I believe, a creativity and an ingenuity which Ireland and Scotland share. This can be a powerful force in terms of business, science and the arts. And there are opportunities there which I hope we will seize together. But we must also employ these skills and all our skills together to face up to the great global challenges of our times, of what you correctly described as unprecedented times. The ticking clock of climate change, with its immense moral, social and environmental implications. The work of peace, and I know that you, First Minister, who began your own political career in the anti-nuclear movement, appreciate the fragility and the importance of peace right across the world, and of the importance of the Good Friday Agreement, an importance which must be underscored and understood at European level by all. At this crucial juncture for our nations and indeed for Europe as a whole, it is important that Ireland and Scotland support each other's voices, making not only our concerns but our ideas heard on the importance of a social Europe grounded in peace, participation and inclusion. A partnership, as you put it so eloquently, equals in a partnership of many. I thank you for the true leadership you have personally shown in stepping up to these important debates of our time. And not only on the national but on the international stage, and I look forward to ever deepening and more complex and more constructive cooperation in the important years ahead. Thank you very much.
Senator Éireann.
First Minister, you're extremely welcome and delighted to address you on behalf of the Labour group here in the Seanad. The Labour movement, the international Labour movement, has had maybe an uncomfortable relationship with national movements in the past. Indeed, our own founder, James Connolly from from Edinburgh once said that you can change the symbols of a state, but that will never be enough. But your own national movement for self-determination has much to be admired of. Certainly from this part of the world where we've seen such sectarian tensions, when we've seen violence, when we've seen bloodshed, your move for national self-determination has seen none of those things. And in fact, your referendum 2 years ago was quite inspiring for us here in Ireland to witness what a fantastic engagement, particularly with young people, and that it didn't become in any way a sectarian headcount. It became rather something that maybe has unified your country rather than anything else. I find it quite inspiring, to be honest, to be in your presence today, because as somebody who is deeply worried about trends across Europe and trends across the world, when we see what's happening in America, in Britain, across Europe, that whenever I hear you speak, I actually am inspired that maybe things can get better. The very first issue that you raised in this House today was of the refugee crisis. I find that deeply moving. I find that the fact that you are so in touch with your own history and our responsibility to that history, incredibly moving and inspiring. And when nationalism across Europe now has a very bad name, your own nationalism and your own sense of your nationalism and your sense of your own nation's history is something that is to be greatly commended. I admire your stances on things such as TTIP. I admire your stances on issues such as marriage equality. And I admire your determination not to allow your country, the UK, and the rest of Europe to break itself up from what has been a good and honourable movement since the mid-40s. Let's remind ourselves that the European Union came out of a time of great division, of war, of pain, of debt, and of suffering. And now it appears that Europe is turning in on itself on the basis, if I might say so, in the Brexit campaign, of a racist lie, of those who will pretend to care about public services but really have a xenophobic heart. And you have stood up against that, First Minister, and we commend you for that. At this time of great uncertainty, at this time of great fear, at this time when people are facing against each other, at this time when leadership is needed, you are a shining light, and not only in these islands, and not only across Europe, but I believe across the world. So as the inevitable reaches its conclusion, as Scotland will, as is inevitable in my view, take its place amongst the nations of the world, as your self-determination becomes a reality, please know that in these houses and in this country you will have the closest of allies, not just on the basis of national self-determination, because of what we must give to the world, our belief system, our values, because at this point, at this historic juncture, I think what we believe in Ireland and what you believe in Scotland is more important now than ever. May I congratulate you for your address, and may I offer you again our solidarity between ourselves and yourselves.
Thank you very much. That concludes the first round, so I propose that I'll allow two at the outset from each group, not together, to come in, and then the minister, our guest of honour, Nicola Sturgeon, can respond to all or whatever. So I think I'll start in the same rotation. So first I have Senator Michelle Mulhern. You have 1 minute now, and I'll be very strict on the time because we don't want speeches, just to ask a question.
Welcome, First Minister Sturgeon, to the Chamber. It's a great honour to have you here. As has been mentioned across the way there are so many issues, and obviously you're here, and Brexit is the burning issue. You referred to climate change, immigration, which of course is tied into Brexit, but of course it has to be said, although one doesn't always want to be saying it, that it's great to have you here as a woman. Just a few decades ago, it wasn't possible in this country for women to engage in public life the way they are now, so it is always an inspiration. And we know that it's the same job of work to be done, whether you're a man or a woman, but without women participating, we're missing out 50% of the talent of the population. So thanks for being here. I also welcome the debate that you bring around the whole issue of nationalism. that it's not an insular thing, and that in fact, if we are to accommodate other people in our country as a nation, we have to draw circles of inclusiveness, and it's about how trying to do that in a modern way, but bring people along with you, people of our own nation. Just 2 questions really.
Sorry, your time is up.
Yes,
sorry,
time's up.
I'm not going to allow that. I was very clear. I'm not going to allow that, because what you're going to do, Senator, is you're going to prevent others coming in. I have to be fair and equal. So you used 1 minute and 20 seconds, and now you want to ask 2 questions. So I'll move on to Senator Daly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, First Minister. Welcome to the House. 100 years ago, Ireland continued its long road to independence in the 1916 Rising. I hope Scotland's journey to independence does not take 100 years. Nationalism, as espoused by Putin, Le Pen and indeed Trump, is a corrosive nationalism. But the nationalism that you espouse, the civic nationalism that you espouse, the nationalism of fairness, of progressive democracy, of social justice, this is a positive nationalism. And the question I put to you is, what can Ireland do to help Scotland achieve its full potential and to achieve its independence? How can we be of assistance to Scotland? Thank you.
Very concise, Senator Marie-Louise O'Donnell.
Thank you very much. And you're very welcome, First Minister, and it's even more glorious that you are a woman here today. I want to ask a very practical question. It's as follows. When will you make the decision to ask the Scottish people to vote again for an independent Scotland? This is the decision, because we can be as independent as we like in our minds, but we have to be practical about it, because the British people voted to leave Europe. And unfortunately, Scotland was part of that, insofar as that you voted against leaving England. So could you just answer that? When will you make the decision to ask the Scottish people to vote again for an independent Scotland? Because that's the start. You know, and no better woman to do it, and no better woman to lead it. But we'd just like to know, when do you feel that might be the right time, or come around, and what would stop you, and what would alert you to do it?
Thank you very much. Senator Warfield. Sorry, well, it's up to yourselves. You're the first indicator.
First Minister, in the coming months, this House will debate the Electoral Amendment Bill. If passed, citizens who have reached the age of 16 will have a right to vote in elections to local government and to the European Parliament. It's worth noting that any attempt to widen the franchise for referenda, general or presidential elections will require a referendum of its own, as proposed by a constitutional convention in 2013. I believe that this bill is ambitious, achievable and above all else the right thing to do. Sinn Fein believe that now more than ever is the right time to do it, to increasingly find ways of strengthening participation and democracy. First Minister, do you believe that 16 and 17-year-olds casting their vote and having their say have strengthened Scottish democracy and the future of Scotland?
Thank you for your precision. Senator Humphreys.
You're very welcome, First Minister. It is going to be tight within the minute. You mentioned the single market and the wish for Scotland to stay within the single market. We here are obviously very concerned about a hard border between ourselves and Northern Ireland, and we will be doing everything we can. But the challenge for Scotland to stay in the single market, that in itself has many great challenges, and I wonder how you're looking at that. One of the biggest issues that's facing not just Ireland or Scotland, but the world is actually climate change. And I think it is a very important subject here and debated in the Chamber. But can you see how better that we can cooperate with Scotland to make this, not just an issue for debate, but actually to make real change?
Thank you, Senator Éireann.
Neighbour, go ahead of me just this once, okay?
Yes.
Thank you, First Minister. And I would like to ask you a question around third level funding. There's a debate in this country at the minute in relation to how we should fund our third level sector, which is, has been in crisis for a number of years now. The debate in relation to this has come heavily down on income contingent loans, which I am obviously completely opposed to, and believe in a publicly funded education system. And I would like you to maybe make reference to how society has benefited in Scotland from a free third level education, both socially and economically, and in relation to inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Fein.
Thank you, First Minister. You're very, very welcome to our Seanad on this very, very special and historic day. I'd like to thank you for opening a Scottish Government office in Dublin. I think it's a great move, and I just want to say that your representative, John Webster, is absolutely a great advocate of all that's good in Scotland and in Ireland. I see you went from 6 seats to 59 seats in the last election. Was that a vote for Scottish independence, or was it your progressive policies?
Thank you, Senator. Senator Clifford Lee.
And thank you, First Minister, for your excellent and very informative address. And it's quite fitting that you're here addressing the House in this special centenary year. The nationalism that you espouse is very similar to the nationalism espoused by the men and women of 1916, and it has not anything to do with the nationalism that we've seen in recent years being sullied by xenophobia and exclusion. The question I'd like to ask is in relation to the open border, which you outlined in your address, which you fully support. How do you see this practically operating? Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Crockwell.
First Minister, you're welcome. First Minister, it has been said that Theresa May will give Scotland anything it wants but independence in the Brexit negotiations. My concern is for the other jurisdiction on this island, and that is the north of Ireland. Some would like to think that this will hasten Irish unification. I don't believe that that's necessarily so, but my concern is that your goodies from Theresa May will be at the expense of Northern Ireland. Would you also accept that Ireland cannot accept a border along the Irish Sea between the UK mainland and this country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Gavin. Sorry, okay, whichever you...
If Theresa May is going to give you anything, could you ask her for a border poll, please? I think you and I, First Minister, for a border poll, a referendum on our independence. First Minister, I think you and I are unique on the floor of this chamber in that we both had and voted in the recent Brexit election. Like you and your party colleagues, I and my colleagues at Sinn Fein campaigned for and voted for the north of Ireland to remain. I'm very inspired, as are many others, by your passion, your dedication and your commitment to your nation and its people and that cause to retain Scotland's place as a nation within the EU. And I share that passion and dedication for seeing Ireland in her entirety retained within the EU as well. But my question, First Minister, is if you could maybe touch on and lay out some of the plans that Scotland have in their demands for the Brexit negotiations that we're facing into imminently.
Thank you. Next is Senator for Civil Engagement Group. Okay, Senator Black.
And welcome, First Minister. You truly are an inspiration, and I do wish you all the best in fighting for independence for your country. I suppose I just also want to commend you on the fantastic work that you have done and are doing on minimum unit pricing. We're trying to bring in here the same legislation here. I suppose I'd like to ask you the biggest challenges for you, what are they with regard to minimum unit pricing? And I also have another question, is how can we support you and your country and the North? How can Ireland support you, and what action can we take in helping you to remain in the EU, and particularly yourselves and in the North as well? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have been very obedient and succinct. I allow one more from each group. So, Senator Butler, you're next, sir.
First Minister, welcome, and I am delighted to hear you visiting and quoting from the Book of Kells. And a born and bred Kells man, Minister, we have looked for one of the Gospels to come back to the people of Kells, so maybe you might support that. When Scotland voted in the referendum for independence, the vote was to say, Minister, since Birek's vote, have you seen a great change? Because personally I think in the UK that if there was a vote again, the referendum would be totally different, and I think immigration was the biggest issue. It was a huge issue there.
Thank you. Senator Ned O'Sullivan.
As you said, it's a very important occasion, and historic occasion for both our nations and indeed for this House. And First Minister, your predecessor, Edward de Bruce, came over here almost exactly 700 years ago and was acclaimed as the last High King of Ireland by our Irish chieftains. Now, there was a sorry outcome to that because, unfortunately, he lost his head literally about a year later. I don't anticipate anything like that is going to happen, First Minister, because I think you will have a sense of the huge appreciation of your visit here in Ireland and the warmth towards you personally and towards your beliefs and what you stand for. It's quite marked. It's palpable. Just one brief question, Cahir. Look, we have both Scotland and Ireland have native languages, the Gaelic. They're both struggling to survive. I would welcome any thoughts you might have as to how we might work best together to preserve these old Gaelic languages.
Thank you. Senator O'Cloughlin.
Gur míl mágad agus mór an tank chéad asocht tí go héireann son bríon an Gaelic agus a bheith in seáinniuh le óráid inspiráideach mírolach scoineal. You're very welcome, First Minister, and thank you for your very inspirational speech. Following on the previous theme, we have a great links as regards the language and the culture. The Gaelic in Scotland and the Gaelic of Ireland are just literally, they went two different paths at one stage, but they are the same language, the same culture, celebrated by different traditions across the islands. And my question would be, how do you see the language, the Gaelic language and culture being used as a mechanism to enforce and to help reconciliation across the island of Ireland and accompanied by Scotland? And also, what steps do you see we should be taking to help support our Irish diaspora in Scotland as well? So, gur míle mágad rís fí teachtas corin teanna is mór an unordúna go bhfuil tú anseo agus go leabhar tú leníomh gur mágad.
Senator Keller.
First Minister, welcome. And I'm just wondering, given the great amount of sharing and learning that we've done here today, how we can build on that to further cooperate and learn from the great leaps that you have taken in childcare, in the areas of dementia, in the areas of social housing, so that we can learn from you and with you in the months, and how maybe we can make use of the new office that's in Dublin to copper fasten those links.
Thank you. Now, I allow our guest of honour, Speaker Nicola Sturgeon, to respond, and if there's time we'll have another question from each group.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very sorry that I am not able to address you in Gaelic as eloquently, or at all in fact, as many of you have addressed me in the Irish Gaelic. But I will start on that point. In Scotland, Gaelic medium education in particular is experiencing something of a resurgence. I mentioned Oireachtas, our Gaelic language college in Skye, which is playing a big role in helping to send the Gaelic language in the right direction. So it's one of many areas where I'm sure there is great scope for us to work together. Can I thank all of you for the warmth of your welcome. I've been incredibly touched today by the sincerity and the warmth and the expressions of friendship from you to Scotland, and I can tell you from the bottom of my heart that I will draw great strength in the difficult months and years that no doubt lie ahead from the discussions that I've had here in Dublin, and particularly in the Seanad today, as I seek to navigate Scotland's way through these difficult times. It's particularly nice to have been addressed by so many women. When I had a very good session yesterday with the Women for Election group that I also met in Dublin last year, I was told that 5 out of the 6 groups in the Seanad are led by women, something, with no offence to any of the men in the chamber, I thoroughly endorse. And of course 3 of Scotland's political parties, my own, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, are also led by women, a great trend in my view in the right direction. Great comment has been made today about the historic nature of this occasion, and it is a historic occasion and one that will live with me for the rest of my life. But it's also of course important to reflect that we are celebrating this historic occasion in a historic year for Ireland, the centenary of your uprising in 1916. And James Connolly has been mentioned, and you know, Senator Éireann, who said that one of James Connolly's, who has just re-entered the chamber, right on cue, one of James Connolly's great comments was that it's not enough and never will be enough simply to change the symbols of a state. And as a Scottish nationalist, I could not agree more with that sentiment, and the leader of the independent group commented also that independence for Ireland was transformational for the country and for your society. And my nationalism, my belief in Scottish independence is in exactly the same vein. It's not an end in itself, it's a means to building a better country. And I've detected great meeting of minds on that issue here today. Senator Éireann, who's just come back into the chamber, I should say, amongst my many yes badge relics of the 2014 independence campaign is another yes badge, which was one Senator Éireann gifted me just after the equal marriage referendum here in Ireland, which I thought of when the senator from Sinn Fein asked me the question about 16 and 17-year-olds voting. One of the wonderful things in the Scottish referendum, it wasn't the outcome, incidentally, but one of the truly wonderful things was the engagement it gave expression to, particularly amongst younger voters. And I am a passionate advocate of 16 and 17-year-olds being able to vote, not just in national referenda, but in every election. If 16-year-olds are able to marry and take on many of the responsibilities of adulthood as they are in many countries, then so too should they have the ability to shape the direction of their country. So good luck with your efforts in that direction. I have heard here today a lot of comments that I agree with. I think it was Senator Higgins who talked about the contribution Scotland makes and wants to continue to make to Europe. And in much of this debate about the European Union, we talk about the benefits we derive from European Union membership. And those benefits are many. They are practical, but they are also about our sense of ourselves and our place in the world. But part of what we are seeking to protect in Scotland now is the contribution that we are able to make. Now, if we think of many of the great and in many respects defining challenges that not just the European Union but our planet is grappling with just now, I'm very proud that in a small way often Scotland is showing leadership. Climate change, for example, where Scotland set the most ambitious climate change targets of any country in the world. At the time we set them, we are now generating more than half of our net electricity demand from renewable energy, showing leadership. Similarly, on issues that have been raised around inequality, inclusion, how we deal with the demands as well as the huge benefits of an ageing population. But in saying that, I would not want to suggest that Scotland doesn't have a lot to learn, because we have significant challenges. And so in contributing, we also draw on the lessons from others. I've been asked questions, for example, about education. I'm proud of the fact that we have free tuition, free access to university in Scotland. That's something I'm determined to protect. But it's not enough in and of itself. We have to find other ways of allowing people, regardless of their background, to take the advantage of a university education. So as well as having something to teach others, we have lots to learn from other countries. Alcohol policy is another area where we are seeking to innovate and experiment with policy that could be transformational. Unfortunately, we're slightly held up in the courts at the moment on minimum pricing for alcohol. But on that, as in many other areas of public policy, we've got something to offer, but also lots to learn. So I look forward on all of these issues and many, many more to continuing to strengthen these links between us. I think you are about to think I'm going to dodge your question, which I'm perhaps going to do slightly, but I am going to address your question. I want to end really in talking about the inspiration that Ireland is to many people in Scotland. Firstly, Ireland, of course, is an inspiration to those of us who believe in Scottish independence. And the comments we've heard from a number of senators about positive civic nationalism, I thoroughly endorse. Ireland is a living, breathing example of that positive nationalism, of independence being the key to transforming a country. And for those of us who believe in Scottish independence, that is inspirational. Now, you should know that you asked the question that all of the Scottish journalists who are here today are poised with their pens in case I answer. When am I going to make a decision on whether there is another Scottish referendum? I'm sorry to disappoint that I'm not going to tell you the answer to that question today, but I do want to say very, very briefly just the process we're engaged in. I've said very clearly many, many times, Scotland didn't vote in 2014 to be part of a UK that was leaving the European Union, taking a step off a Brexit, hard Brexit cliff edge with lots of damage to our economy and our society. And if that's the prospect that faces us, then I do believe Scotland will have the right to decide whether it wants to do that or instead choose a better future. But I said the morning after the referendum, not as leader of the SNP but as First Minister of Scotland, we must explore all options to try to protect Scotland's interests, and that's the process that we are going through. Many practical issues arise from that. We've heard questions and comments about borders and, would it be possible for Scotland to remain in the single market if the rest of the UK leaves? There are real difficulties and challenges around that. But in unprecedented times, in uncharted territory where this has never been done before, what I believe is important, that we have an open mind and an imagination and an ability and willingness to innovate to find the solutions to these issues. And while there are differences, and I do not want to conflate the issues in Ireland to the issues in Scotland, if we can find practical solutions for some of our challenges, then we can inspire each other to find the practical solutions for others. So in that sense, Ireland is a great inspiration, but Ireland is also an inspiration to Scotland, regardless of views on independence for Scotland or continuing union within the United Kingdom, because you are an example of a small, outward-looking country that makes its mark on the world. I'm always struck when I come to Ireland as the leader of a devolved administration, and I come to independent Ireland, a country smaller than Scotland, a country, if I may say so, without the vast natural resources that Scotland has at our disposal, and yet a country that is proudly independent, making its own way in the world, and that is inspiring to all of us. I'll end with answering the question that many of you asked me. How can Ireland help Scotland? Now, I know, and it's a comment I've made directly to the Taoiseach and your Foreign Minister, I know there are priorities for Ireland, very important priorities for Ireland in the challenges that lie ahead. But how you can support Scotland is just doing what you have done today, understanding Scotland's position, holding out the hand of friendship, being there as our neighbours, our friends, our allies, our family. I'm deeply grateful for the invitation to be here today, but I am even more grateful for the enormous support that you are showing me and showing Scotland. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much. And before I'll call the leader in to respond to the Senate, when I grew up in a very remote part of West Cork called the Sheep's Head Peninsula, and my lullaby as a child was the corncrake, which unfortunately vanished. But when I recently visited, well, 3 or 4 years ago, Mull and Iona, I was pleasantly surprised in the hills of Iona that I heard the corncrake again. It brought back happy memories. My son was with me and he didn't know what that creature was, so protect your corncrakes in rural Scotland. So, leader, on that note, you can now respond on behalf of the Seanad.
Seanadh lost a rule, la untuk, agus lawn da una. And Mahon Fein, agus a hern got in it a baile la kele, Seanad Éireann show. Bulum Buicus, I sucked on Kedara, na Howland, I sucked on Truss, a hooked dum lung gree on Seanad Shaw, August come over, I sucked on a rod cooktook a lane of a gun of Tasulugum Gudinamid Macnuv, I sucked on a rod on Kedara, come over on a rod Salera August cooktook. Today, Cathaoirleach and First Minister, is an historic day for all of us in Seanad Éireann and for the institutions of the Oireachtas. It is not just because it's the head of state that's visiting, but it's because it's the first address to us by head of state. And you didn't disappoint. The words of Heaney, if you have the words, there's always a chance that you'll find a way come to mind. And that way is about joining together to ensure that Scotland and Ireland collectively play a powerful role within the European Union in a post-Brexit era, but also that we play a role together in working to attain and achieve human rights across the world. In your address, First Minister, you underscored the importance of us working together, le Céile, to forge an alliance in not just a post-Brexit Europe, but in a world that is changing, so that we can protect our shared interests. We have a shared history, a common streak of independence, and a need and a desire to be heard and to be felt around the world. In a world that is changing, the word of Yeats, all is changed, change utterly, a terrible beauty is born, whether it's the election of Trump in America, whether it's the rise of nationalism across parts of the world, in Europe, whether it is because of Brexit. What requires is an understanding and a willingness to engage and to listen, as you said in your address. We very much support your views and your support for us in regarding the Ireland post-Brexit. We are an island, north and south, of many different strands that needs to be heard as well across the world. The open border on Ireland, the single market and free trade, the pursuit of social justice, the working together on climate change, the humanitarian desire to see people, whether it's in Syria or many parts of the world, accepted and looked after. And that's why today, in your address, you didn't just touch about Ireland, Scotland and Brexit, but it was about our places in the world. Climate change, the marriage equality referendum are things we are learning from you. The courage you've showed in your leadership is one that we all, as political people, must aspire to achieve. And over the centuries, leadership involves making tough decisions. It involves listening. It involves engaging, and today you've done that with us. The political and social landscape of the world is changing. The body politic must listen to the people. The institutions of Europe must reflect upon the votes cast in Britain, but also in the independent individual countries in elections. And that's why today we must work to achieve the best for our people. We are the people's representatives. We are the voices of the people. Those who vote for us and those who vote against us. Those who vote for Brexit and those who voted not for Brexit. But as an island and as a nation, we can be proud of the leadership you've shown. Your willingness to change and to challenge, whether it's in the Parliament in Hollywood in terms of your representation in Cabinet, whether it's your support for marriage equality, whether it's your support for the growth of greater communication between both sides of this island. You spoke about the importance of Columkill and what he brought to Iona in 563. And you spoke about McLean and the humanity. What both of our countries share is that great sense of humanity, but what is doing right for our people. We have both suffered the scourge of immigration, and we're beginning to emerge from that period in our economic history. Ireland and Scotland together must play a strong and strident role within Europe. That requires us as parliamentarians to forge links with our neighbours in England, in Wales, but also in Scotland. And that's why I was very proud as member of the last Oireachtas to visit your Parliament and to see the tremendous work you're doing in that Parliament. It's important that we build upon that. The friendship we speak about is reflected in your relationship with Taoiseach, who I know you've met with last week. The challenge for all of us now is not to look inward, but it's to look outward, where we can be, as both small nations, seen as two island nations with a huge heart across the world. First Minister, thank you for being here today. You've brought with us a message of hope and of inspiration. Our peoples will look to us for leadership in this very difficult time that 2016 is. But as we reflect upon the history of our country, our rising of 1916 taught us one thing, that there is strength in standing together. We'll break us.
Thank you very much. Now, can I ask the leader to move the suspension till
I so propose,
2:30? That agreed. House stands suspended till 2:30. Thank you very much.